here today with Melissa and Trevor Atchison, and we're going to ask you a little bit about your pre-weaning protocols and how you prepare your calves to go into your backgrounding program. Could you tell us how you do that? Melissa, we'll start.
Yeah, I think just as the fall draws nearer and the pastures start to go dormant, we try to, collect those herds into bigger herds as they move closer to home, and that's kind of what we do to get them closer to home, to get them ready. And then we might start doing things that introduce them to those novel feed ingredients that they might be seeing while they're still pairs. So whether that might be swath grazing, even stockpile grass, we might meter out some silage to them, perhaps just to introduce them to those novel feed ingredients, because that grazing and eating those different feed ingredients is very much a taught and learned behavior. And silage is such a unique smelling ingredient specifically that it really helps those calves kind of learn what it is and put it in their memory bank.
Okay, Trevor, what are the actual steps you take to wean your calves?
Well, here at our place we use quiet wean nose tags. And so prior to weaning, so approximately 7 days ahead of when they're actually weaned, we bring the cattle in and process them. They all get their booster vaccinations of blackleg and then a 4-way respiratory. And we usually give some deworming stuff, and then we put in the quiet wean nose tag. Anything that wasn't castrated or dehorned, we try to do all that at that time. And then they're turned back out with their mothers for a week, 5 to 7 days. And then we, as Melissa mentioned, we start to introduce different feed stuff. So in that week, we are almost trying to get them solely on introduced feeds, mainly silage mixed in, so they get to learn what it is. And then after that, after the timeline, we get them in, run them back through the facilities, pull the nose tags, and then sort them by sex and by size, and put them in their respective pens for where they're going to be for at least the next 45 to 60 days till they get settled in and on feed, and get them onto that new feed and into a confined space with a water bowl, all that kind of stuff as part of their adapting to their new where they are, their new home, I guess, where they're now in a pen versus a field situation.
Okay, you mentioned nose tags, you mentioned pre-weaning familiarity with different types of feedstuffs, inoculations. You've got them into the backgrounding area now. How is that working? Do you like those nose tags? Are you happy with what you see?
Yes, very much so. We've been using nose tags for 10 years, maybe, I don't know how long. And a couple of years ago, it was a bad fall, busy, wet, and we didn't use the nose tags. We just the way it worked out. And yeah, it was, my nephew works with us full time, and my niece helps us when we process cows, and they just couldn't believe the wreck. Again, but I mean, the calves' pace, the cows' pace, it's just a whole different scenario when you cold wean versus those nose tags. So we certainly like that part. They walk less, or if they do bawl, they're eating. And getting them in a pen on feed is always, every year is different of how they adapt to that new feed stuff. If the grass is short when you got them on the cow yet, like that last week, and it gets colder, then it's better because they tend to have to eat and they'll go look for that feed. If the weather's nice on that 7 days on the cow and then it turns cold in the corral, it's not so good because they need to be eating because they need the nutrition, but they sometimes are just finicky. So our first rations start with a lot of hay. When they're on the cow, actually, the last couple of days are probably all silage going out, very little hay. But when we bring them back and put them in the pens, the ration is probably 50% hay or better, tub ground or ground of some sort, and then gradually we take that hay back out as they learn to eat. I know we've also used oats, different feed stuff. So yeah, the goal is to have their nutrition for what they should be gaining. If you want them to gain 2 pounds a day, you're supplying that many nutrients in the feed stuff. But if they should eat 100% of that with silage or bulk, you could add more grains or concentrate something with more dense feed nutrition that they can eat less but still get close to what the requirement is. That's the goal, because their intake is just quite often not what it should be, or a percentage of the calves won't be. Some of them go in and they start to eat right away, but there's always a percentage that take longer to get to that. And then we walk the pens daily. Same thing, water bowls. We try to have them, we use a lot of off-site watering all summer, so they do know what a water trough and what that is. So, but sometimes as calves, you just got to stand in the pen and, coax them if something's drinking or after you feed them, you just walk them, and it's amazing how, you know, the odd one will fall off and won't find it if you take that time. So you monitor the health and whatnot of them, their activity quite regularly right after they're weaned for a period of time.
Okay, it sounds like you have in mind as an overall principle that low stress, easy management introduction to feed. Is that accurate, Melissa? And if so, then how would you gauge your personal time in the herd with the animals? Is that also a contributing factor?
So I think all of the things that we do preparing for weaning is additive. They all layer on top of one another, and the cumulative benefit is greater than the sum of its parts. So, like Trevor talked about, the weather, we will watch the long range forecast even and make sure that, we're not going to have a big, warm period right after we take those out, because that affects their intake. And he talked about moisture content of feeds, right? So because our calves are born in May and June, they're a bit lighter weight than calves maybe born in February, March. So those calves just don't have the capacity to eat a high moisture feed like silage and meet all of their requirements, even though it is a very high nutrient feed. They just can't eat the volume they need to achieve that. So really important things to consider. But in terms of the preparation, those things, it's a lot to consider, but when they're all done in practice, it makes for less labor during the actual feeding period.
Okay, Trevor, in listening to you talking, I'm listening to all the various ingredients that you have. I'm going to say you probably have a mixer, and a mixer can bring both accuracy and reduced feed costs. How would you say that mixer's impacted your operation if you think back to maybe when you didn't have one?
Well, yeah, before we didn't have one, the calves were fed on with bale rings, and we hauled out crushed barley. And probably for weaning calves, that wasn't a bad system at all. But because even now we'll put the same hay, like we might spread bales of hay loose in the pen. Like, I'm not afraid of wasting some when you first get them in a pen. But still feeding calves in a bale ring, we've all seen those across the field, and especially 5-weight calves like ours, hay saver feeders, there's a lot of weight. Or hay saver feeders are difficult for calves to access, right? So regular round bale feeders for a calf to get into the feed, and there's still waste around it, right? They pull hay out, that's just the way they are. And then getting them on the grain, I mean, if they don't all come to eat, right, then it's just straight barley or whatever, some can get too much and some will get none. So the mixture prevents all that by the feeds all in one place. You put it in a trough, they can't waste it so much, and then every mouthful should be the same, the first one as the last one, because it's all mixed, and there's none of this sorting out. Too many come to eat the barley, and some don't get it. So no matter what time of day they decide to come to the bunk to eat or the trough, they should be getting the same feed that the ones before them ate. As far as feed, utilization and being able to match what you're feeding to the calves, there's no other system that does that, I don't think. There is a cost associated with a mixture and all the equipment is, to go with it. But when you offset the waste factor of the feed of the hay and bale rings, I think it's economies of scale. Your mixture needs to match however many you're feeding, and if you do that, I think it's quite economical to have that work in your favor to utilize it.
Yeah, and the consistency of your gains across that pen of calves, right? Because you have those more aggressive calves that are gonna, go right after that barley, and you'll have those ones that are a little bit more meek and mild, and then that's all gobbled up. So you don't really know. You have a ration built, but that doesn't mean that that's what they're eating, right? Calves will eat what they want, not what they need. So super important. So the homogeneous mix with a mixer wagon just guarantees that every bite is the same. So that's really, really helpful.
So
especially if there's no other option. Like
Yeah.
all there is the prepared. When you're feeding hay and grain, some of them, they may never get to the trough.
Helps with subruminal acidosis. Helps with them not finding those fines in the bottom, and all these things. Nice consistent mixture.
So there's people listening today that have had no experience in backgrounding, and maybe even some young people who are new to weaning. Could you emphasize 1 or 2 points for them that would really make a difference and has done in your experience?
Well, I guess in our experience, those quiet wean nose tags are probably the biggest thing we've done, or the most instrumental in getting that low stress deal. And you talked about that. I mean, we try to handle our cattle with low stress, you know, wherever we're moving them or whatnot. But we rotate pastures so they're used to people. I mean, it's when you go to check and get out of the truck, you know, even if they're on a wide range and you don't see, like, just get out of off the quad, off the horse, and walk through them so they understand what a person is. And then you couple all that with the feed and getting them in a pen. But that quiet wean nose tag, and in our own situation, we used to get them in 2 or 3 weeks prior to weaning and give them their booster vaccines anyways. So it doesn't mean any more time through the shoot for us. It just put them in a week apart. And, you know, vaccinations, you can't say enough about them with the one-nut branding or turn out the grass and a booster in the fall. You know, if you can get it 3 weeks or 2 weeks before weaning is better. But I mean, if it's, it just helps with the health of the cattle, and that's your next thing, is the health. And that weaning period is what, you know, sick ones don't gain. And our goal is to get them on feed, get them settled, and get them gaining weight, because you lose, you know, 1 to 3 weeks of time. But those calves aren't actually, you know, they'll lose a little bit, they'll shrink from being off mum, and then they got to gain that back, plus start gaining weight. So those quiet wean nose tags seem to be one of the biggest things, that our gaining period starts earlier because they're just low stress and they're ready to, you know, and, you know, talk about our young calves, but sometimes if we have, you know, winter moving in the middle of November when we're doing this, they're okay with those nose tags, create enough stress when they're with mum that when they get off mum, they're kind of okay with that, because life's easier, the feed's, you know, there's no less competition. So that all can kind of work in our favor. So matching, you know, the quiet weans with your system, and introducing the feed to the cattle ahead of time. You know, even if you're going to feed them hay, it doesn't matter, but get them on dry feed of hay to start with before you take them away from the cow, if at all possible. Just to introduce the new world they're going to.
I think that treating weaning and shifting your thinking from thinking of weaning as an event to a process really, really helps. And think of the things that you could do within that process to prep them for the actual event of weaning, right?
Great. Well, thanks so much, Trevor, and thanks a lot, Melissa.
Thank you.
Here we're in Findlay, Manitoba with the Hutchisons on their beef farm. Thanks a lot.